To me, it is clear that the Democratic establishment has got to be charged with malpractice. They have got to be charged with malpractice. Look, the last people to blame in general should be the population at large. Yes, you've heard me state categorically that Kamala Harris lost the election, not because of policy specifically, but because of gender and race. I stick with that. But here's the kicker. The Democratic establishment gave these folks who knew better but still voted against her the excuse to do so. Let me elaborate a bit. I had a whole lot of Panamanians. My group, Antex, had a whole lot of Panamanians over. We celebrated Veterans Day. We wanted to celebrate all the Panamanians who lost their lives, who've shed blood for this country, given Trump's behavior or belief that somehow those people south of the border are animals, criminals who are no use to this country. Well, we wanted to show that, most of us from south of the border actually come to this country, defend this country, and make this country what it is. But as I'm taking them back, Roberto and myself, we're taking them back to the airport. And we're seeing all these construction projects. Some of them are before the infrastructure deal, but a lot of them are since the infrastructure deal. Let me first qualify something here. In Texas, recently, all these freeways that we've been building, for all practical purposes, were toll roads. We have an evil state government that pretty much cuts taxes for the wealthy and the corporations, but when it comes to highways, etc., we yet pay the corporations to build the highways and to run the highways, which means we pay an additional tax to use our freeways here, especially those in Central Texas that are being built near Austin, etc. So we are on our trip to Austin, and I'm seeing all these construction projects, and I've seen hundreds, thousands of people working, good paying jobs here in Texas, a red state. But still, there was no sign that said courtesy of the infrastructure bill signed by Joe Biden. Of course, when the Democratic Congress passed the bill after Donald Trump crashed the economy with his response to COVID-19, he wanted those checks that he didn't want to give in the first place, that the Democratic Party said we needed to give Americans relief while this pandemic is on. Okay, I'll do it, but you have to sign Donald Trump on it. But all these infrastructure projects, all these chip plants that are being built, no Biden's name on it, no Democratic Party, led solely by the Democratic Party. The CHIPS bill, only support by the Democratic Party. The IRA, only support by the Democratic Party. The infrastructure bill, bipartisan. And then here's the kicker. The infrastructure bill and most of these bills, most of the monies for these bills go into red states. Why? Because they're the poorer states. They're the most needy states. They're the states that need the most. So all these big bills went into the red states, but there was no sign that said brought to you courtesy of the Biden administration. But yet, as the sign-in for all these projects are being there, the same Republican politicians who voted against them are there at the opening, and the people in those red states reward these people who didn't want to give them the bill, reward them with re-election, many of them with re-election. And for all the things that Donald Trump was unable to do, he had infrastructure project. Every week there was an infrastructure project, never got it done, never got it executed. Biden comes in, first year, gets the infrastructure project done, and now we're watching the fruits of that labor. We are watching, after 4 years, the success of the infrastructure bill, the success of the Inflation Reduction Act, the success of the CHIPS Act, and on and on and on. And there are so many policies that came into play. Donald Trump only did 3 of any substance. And yet, people claim they were voting for Donald Trump, the criminal, the thug, the rapist, over Kamala Harris because they liked his policies and they thought he would be better for the economy. Well, like I said, the Democratic Party should be charged with malpractice because these people just weren't seeing in boldface what the Biden administration did. And in the process, they gave people who needed a reason to fight, to execute their prejudice on Kamala for her gender and race. They needed an excuse. So ignorance was their excuse. Ignorance of not knowing what was done during the Biden administration, and the malpractice of the Democratic Party not to force it into their minds gave them the excuse for their prejudices to come out and say, I will vote for the thug, the rapist, over the intellect, over the smart woman, over the woman who can speak. Well, a little too late, but it's still and hurtful when seen. I want you to listen to this piece by El Señor Lawrence O'Donnell, because it lays it out as it should. Then we'll take it on the other side.
Instead of getting drowned in that fire hose tonight, we are going to begin what I hope is a series of reports to voters that are absolutely critical to voter participation in a democracy. Most important thing to know when you look at a ballot is what you are voting for. And that isn't easy to do because your only choice on the ballot is who you are voting for. Many voters mistakenly thought when they voted for Donald Trump that they were voting for someone who would get things done in their community. That's because most of us, and that very much includes me, don't always know who to credit for the good things or the bad things that government has done. Who did that? Who built that new bridge? Who rebuilt our airport to make it a state-of-the-art airport? Why did that new chips factory locate in that town? Who did that? The answers to those questions are critical to informed voter participation in a democracy. People will automatically get refunds from airlines next year when their flights are canceled, and they won't know that Joe Biden did that. People will be driving over bridges with their kids in the back seat, not knowing that that bridge was rebuilt and made safer by Joe Biden. It would take much more than the full hour of this program to describe what Joe Biden did as president of the United States. But for most other presidents, it would take less than an hour to describe what they did in the presidency. Donald Trump, in 4 years, did tax cuts and tariffs that raised prices, and he built a little bit of wall at the southern border. Not 2,300 miles of border wall, just a tiny fraction of that. That's what he did. You have probably heard many times on this program that what Joe Biden built as president compares only to what Franklin Delano Roosevelt did in 12 years in the presidency before there were term limits for president. President Roosevelt's revolutionary program that changed everything about the way we live in America was called the New Deal. The most poverty-stricken group of Americans in the 1930s were the elderly. President Roosevelt created Social Security and provided a financial security minimum for people over 65 that never existed before. President Roosevelt enacted the first minimum wage, massive infrastructure spending all over the country that provided jobs and improved communities all over, everywhere we live in this country. Donald Trump kept promising an infrastructure bill when he was president and kept having infrastructure weeks and did absolutely nothing. The Trump administration didn't write one sentence of an infrastructure bill, never mind have a vote on it. There should be a name for what Joe Biden did. Franklin Roosevelt came up with the name the New Deal when he was running for president for the first time in 1932, in the middle of the worst depression in the 20th century. He promised America what he called a New Deal for the American people. The phrase caught on right away, and reporters began referring to the New Deal in the first year of the Roosevelt presidency. And we still talk about it today as the most important turning point in the definition of what was possible in American government. What Joe Biden did should have a name like that. Everyone knew what you meant when you were talking about the New Deal in 1934 or 1944 or 1954. Our next guest has a name for what Joe Biden did.
President Biden understands that policy is about everyday life.
The middle class built the country.
It's about people.
And unions built the middle class.
He doesn't just see a road or a bridge. He sees somebody's commute home back to their family. He doesn't just see ships and ports and supply chains. He sees ways for us to get the things we count on at the grocery store. That's what all of this is actually about. Taking together a belief in how to use government to solve problems, a recognition of what we were up against, and a level of ambition. I think all of that is what has added up into the enormous progress that we've made in recent years. Something collectively I like to think of as the big deal.
Now, my question to you again, now that you are seeing what a new Donald Trump administration is starting to be, Matt Gaetz as Attorney General? Really? A clown as Defense Secretary? Oh my God, it's a caricature. It's a car full of clowns that's taken leadership position in the Trump administration. So we're leaving competence to incompetence. We're leaving successful a government that knows how to execute successfully versus somebody who allowed COVID to destroy our economy. Do we have a price to pay for what we voted into office? And for those who use their prejudice, that was on a facade of wanting his policies because his policies you thought were better. I mean, categorically or factually wrong, but you thought that. God help us. God help us for how 50.2% of Americans have screwed up. And it's on you. Your gullibility, we are going to have to live through for 4 years. Competence versus incompetence. Truthfulness over lies. But instead, we get the lies, we get the immorality, we get the dishonesty, we get the fraud, we get the authoritativeness, because again, you just couldn't get past your prejudice.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number 1, subscribe to our channel. And number 2, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.